Hey guys, Echo here, and welcome to Elden Ring Lore to sleep to. The lore of Elden Ring starts long before the Tarnished enters the Land Between, and so starting at the beginning, the game speaks often of the Greater Will, though never in a way that fully explains what it truly is. Like so much within the world of Elden Ring, its nature remains obscured beneath layers of myth, prophecy, and religious devotion. To some, it is a divine creator. To others, something far colder, an intelligence from beyond the stars that descended upon the lands between long before recorded history. Whether God, cosmic force, or parasitic invader, the Greater Will exists as an unseen presence whose influence stretches across every corner of the world. Its power is represented through gold, the soft glow of grace, the radiant branches of the Erd tree towering over the horizon, the shimmering guidance that calls the Tarnished back from the death itself. Gold in Elden Ring is not merely symbolic of wealth or holiness, it is the physical expression of the Greater Will's authority. A celestial fingerprint left upon reality itself. At the center of this influence lies Queen Marika the Eternal, chosen vessel of the Greater Will and bearer of the Elden Ring. Through her, the Outer God was able to impose order upon the chaotic and brutal world of the Lands Between. But the Elden Ring is not truly a ring in the conventional sense. It is an abstract and sacred construct formed from immense runes, each one embodying fundamental laws of existence itself. Life, death, order, fate. These concepts are not philosophical ideas within Elden Ring's universe. They are literal forces that can be removed, altered, and rewritten. Through possession of the Elden Ring, Marika became more than a queen. She became the living vessel of cosmic law itself. The Erd tree, glowing with impossible golden light, flourished as a direct extension of this power, spreading the influence of the Greater Will across the world like roots beneath the soil. Entire civilizations rose beneath its radiance. Worship became law, faith became governance, and over time, the Golden Order emerged. The Golden Order was not merely a religion, nor simply a kingdom. It was an entire worldview built around the idea that the Greater Will's design represented perfect order. Under its doctrine, existence itself was categorized into what was holy and what was profane, what belonged within the order and what threatened it. Anything outside the system became feared. The undead, those touched by chaotic flame, creatures born outside the Erd tree's grace. Entire peoples and cultures were cast aside because they represented realities the Golden Order could not control. Yet, even with all its power, the Greater Will rarely acts directly. Instead, it communicates through strange intermediaries known as the Two Fingers. Towering and grotesque, the figures appear ancient beyond comprehension, like remnants of something not entirely meant for the mortal world. They serve as emissaries, interpreters of divine intent, relaying the supposed words of the Greater Will to its followers. But the Two Fingers themselves raise unsettling questions. Where did they come from? Were they created by the Greater Will, or did they descend alongside it from somewhere beyond the stars? Their alien appearance feels deeply unnatural, as if they belong in a cosmic ecosystem entirely detached from humanity's understanding. Even their method of communication is disturbing. They do not speak in clear language, but through cryptic movements interpreted by finger readers, elderly mystics who spend their lives attempting to decipher the twitching motions of these enormous severed digits. The deeper one looks into Elden Ring's lore, the more unsettling the Greater Will becomes. It does not resemble a loving deity watching over humanity. Instead, it feels distant, vast, indifferent, a cosmic intelligence imposing structure upon reality for reasons no mortal could even fully understand. The Erd tree's golden beauty masks something ancient and unknowable lurking beneath it, and the further the story unfolds, the more it becomes clear that the Lands Between may not be blessed by the Greater Will at all. They may simply be controlled by it. Long before the Erd tree bathed the world in gold, before the Golden Order carved its laws into reality itself, the Lands Between belonged to another age entirely, an older world, a world of storms, stone, and dragons. In those ancient days, the skies were ruled by the dragons beneath the reign of Dragon Lord Placidusax. a being so old and powerful that even time itself seems unable to fully erase his presence. Deep within the ruins of Farum Azula, beyond collapsing temples and floating debris, frozen with impossible currents of time, Placidusax waits internally in silent anticipation. The game describes him not merely being a king, but as an Elden Lord, the first, implying that even before Marika and the Erdtree, another divine order once existed, and like Marika after him, Placidusax served as a god. The dragons were once allied with an unnamed outer god, a mysterious divine force whose identity remains entirely unknown. Unlike the Greater Will, almost nothing is said of this entity. No statues remain, no sculptures survived, only absence. But that absence itself tells the story, because at some point this god abandoned the dragons completely. What followed was not a sudden destruction, but a slow and mournful decline. The immortal civilization of dragons began to crumble. Their once glorious capital, Farum Azula, became fractured and broken, suspended outside conventional time itself. Entire sections of the city drift endlessly through violent skies, as though reality around it had begun collapsing. Ruins float where mountains should stand. Tornadoes spiral internally through shattered temples. Time within Farum Azula no longer behaves naturally, almost as if the city became trapped in the moment of its own death. Why this happened is never fully explained or understood. Perhaps the abandonment of their god destabilized the very foundations of their civilization. Perhaps some catastrophic war shattered reality there. Or perhaps the dragons, desperate to preserve what remained, attempted to escape time itself. Whatever the truth may be, Farum Azula feels less like a ruined city and more like the corpse of an ancient world refusing to disappear. And while the dragons slowly faded, another force was beginning to emerge. Before the Erdtree existed in its current form, life within the lands between centered around something known as the Crucible. This primordial force represented life in its rawest and most chaotic state, where distinctions between species and forms were blurred together. The Crucible was not orderly or refined, it was wild evolution, overflowing vitality, and tangled biological chaos. Vestiges of this era remain scattered through the game, in strange hybrid creatures and ancient beings marked by horns, tails, scales, and wings. To the modern Golden Order, these traits would later become seen as impure. Signs of regression toward an older age that the Order sought to erase. But in the time of the Crucible, these aspects were considered divine. Life itself had not been domesticated. Then came the arrival of the Greater Will. From somewhere beyond the cosmos, the Greater Will sent a golden star crashing into the lands between. Within that star was the Elden Beast, a living incarnation of the Order itself, and a direct vassal of the Greater Will. This moment may be the singular most important event in the entire history of Elden Ring. It marks the point where an ancient, alien, cosmic force quite literally descended from the heavens and embedded itself into the world. The Elden Beast would eventually become intertwined with Queen Marika, merging into her very being. Through this union, Marika became the vessel of the Elden Ring and the chosen god of the Greater Will. Yet even Marika herself remains deeply mysterious. Before her ascension, very little is known of her, other than she belonged to the Newman, a race said to have originated outside of the lands between. Much like the Greater Will itself, the Newman were foreigners to this world. Their origins remain obscure, almost dreamlike, as though they were emerged from another reality. At some point, after becoming the Greater Will's chosen vessel, Marika established Leyndell, the royal capital that would become the center of the Golden Order's growing empire. From there, the Erdtree's influence spread outwards across the lands between, and conflict became inevitable. The dragons, ancient rulers of the world, suddenly found a new power encroaching upon their domain. War erupted between Leyndell and the dragons. Even in the present ruins of the capital, the evidence still remains. Massive dragon corpses lie draped across the city's walls and streets, frozen monuments to an age-defining conflict. One colossal dragon, Grandsax, launched an enormous assault against Leyndell itself, an attack so devastating that it became legend within the history of the Erdtree. But despite the fury of the ancient dragons, the power of the Greater Will ultimately prevailed. The Golden Order survived, the dragons did not. Yet, unlike many conflicts within Elden Ring, this war did not end in complete extermination. Over time, the surviving dragons of the war became less hostile, and fascination with them began to grow among humans. Dragon cults emerged, particularly within Leyndell itself, where knights had studied dragon lightning and sought to imitate the ancient creatures they once fought. Some became obsessed with becoming dragons entirely. This led to horrifying transformations through the practice of dragon communion, where humans consumed dragon hearts in hopes of gaining their power, but the process rarely ended well. The magma worms scattered throughout the lands between are tragic remnants of these failed ascensions. Once human, they partially transformed into dragon-like beings but became grotesque and malformed, cursed creatures trapped between two forms. Their bodies grew immense and reptilian, yet they never achieved true draconic majesty. Most painfully of all, they lost the ability to fly. They reached toward divinity and instead became monsters. And still, despite everything, not all dragons remained enemies. One of the most important moments in this uneasy reconciliation came through Godwyn the Golden, son of Marika. Unlike many within the Golden Order, Godwyn formed a genuine bond with the ancient dragon Fordysax. The two became close companions, symbolizing a rare peace between the old age and the new. Other dragons integrated themselves in the changing world as well. Some aligned with human institutions. One even became associated with Raya Lucaria and the study of sorcery. By this point, the age of dragon supremacy had effectively ended. The ancient storm had passed, and beneath the growing branches of the Erdtree, the Golden Order prepared to reshape the world completely. As Leyndell rose beneath the growing influence of the Greater Will, the world itself began to change alongside it. What had once been wild, primordial, and chaotic was gradually reshaped into something ordered, controlled, refined beneath the radiance of gold. It was during this era that the ancient form of the Erdtree underwent a transformation. Before becoming a colossal golden symbol seen throughout Elden Ring, the Erdtree existed in a more primal state, deeply connected to the crucible of life. In those earliest ages, life was not separated into neat categories or hierarchies. Everything bled together. Humans, beasts, dragons, and other forms of life carried traces of one another, as though existence itself had not fully settled into its final shape. The crucible represented the ancient blending, a time when evolution, mutation, and vitality had surged freely throughout the world without restraint. But the Golden Order was built upon structure. This structure required purity. As the Greater Will's influence spread through Marika and the Elden Ring, the primordial Erdtree was transformed into the radiant symbol of perfect order that dominates the lands between. Gold replaces chaos, hierarchy replaced wildness. The old world was not entirely erased, but it was buried beneath doctrine and fear. Yet traces of that previous age still remained. The Crucible Knights are among the clearest remnants of this forgotten era. Ancient warriors clad in heavy bronze armor, they once served the primordial form of the Erdtree before the Golden Order fully crystallized. Unlike many relics of the old world, they were not exterminated outright. Instead, they were allowed to remain, perhaps out of respect of their strength or usefulness, though their existence became increasingly uncomfortable with the ideology of the Golden Order, because the Crucible Knights embodied something the Golden Order wished to move beyond. They represented the truth that life was once chaotic, and nowhere was this contradiction more visible than in the Omens. Before the rise of the Golden Order, children born with aspects of the Crucible were considered blessed. Horns, tails, immense size, and other animalistic features were seen as a sign of divine vitality, evidence of a connection between the primordial forces of life itself. In the older world, such beings may have been revered, but under the Golden Order, those same traits became signs of impurity. The Omens became living reminders of a past the Greater Will sought to suppress. Their bodies carried traces of Crucible's untamed nature, and within the ideology of perfect order that made them unacceptable. The Erdtree demanded unity beneath its laws. Anything that blurred distinctions or threatened the harmony became something to fear. Whether this persecution stemmed directly from the Greater Will itself or from Marika and her followers interpreting its will remains uncertain. One of the central mysteries of Elden Ring is how much agency Marika truly possessed. Was she willingly shaping the world according to her own beliefs, or was she merely the vessel of an incomprehensible cosmic force manipulating reality through her? The game never gives a clear answer. But whatever the truth may be, the consequences were devastating. Omens were cast into the depths beneath civilization, hidden away in the sewers beyond Leyendell, like shameful secrets the Golden Order refused to acknowledge. Many had their horns brutally cut away at birth, an agonizing process that often killed them. Those who survived were imprisoned underground for the eternity of their lives, surrounded by filth and darkness beneath the radiant capital above. The contrast feels intentional. Above ground, the Erdtree glows with a divine beauty. Below it, the rejected children of the Crucible rot in chains. And over time, the prejudice only worsened. The rise of the Omen Killers marked the point where the discrimination transformed into outright slaughter. These masked executioners hunted Omens relentlessly, murdering them in the name of purification. Their grotesque masks, stretched into frozen smiles, make them appear less like holy warriors and more like butchers attempting to disguise cruelty as righteousness. But the Omens were not the only victims of the Golden Order's obsession with purity. Throughout the lands between, entire races and peoples were pushed into the margins of existence simply because they did not fit neatly within the Order's vision of the world. The misbegotten, twisted humanoids bearing wings, claws, and leonine traits were reduced to slavery despite their intelligence and culture. Once perhaps connected to the Crucible itself, they became disposable labor beneath the Erdtree's rule. The demi-humans, chaotic and tribal, were viewed as lesser creatures, barely deserving recognition. The Albinorics, artificial beings created through arcane means, suffered relentless persecution because they existed outside the Erdtree's natural order. Many were hunted, tortured, or exterminated simply for existing. Even the vulgar militia, grotesque and stunted warriors hidden throughout the world, reflected the broader pattern of exclusion and abandonment that permeates the lands between. And then there are the bats. One of the most hauntingly tragic details in all of Elden Ring belongs to the winged singing creatures scattered across ruined cliffs and forgotten places. At first glance they appear monstrous, little more than hostile enemies lurking in the darkness, but if the player listens closely, the bats sing mournful songs in Latin. Not fantasy gibberish, but real Latin. Their song is a lament, a sorrowful hymn mourning what they once were and what they have become. They speak of being denied home, denied grace, denied belonging beneath the Erdtree's light. The fact that these monstrous creatures sing with such human sadness completely changes the way they are perceived. Suddenly they no longer feel like random enemies, they feel abandoned. That is one of the defining truths of Elden Ring's world. The Golden Order brought stability, power, and divine structure to the lands between, but everywhere beneath its golden surface are the discarded remnants of those who did not fit in within its vision, entire races buried beneath ideology. Ancient truths condemned as curses, lives reduced to impurity simply because they reflected a world older than the Erdtree. And the more one examines the lands between, the more the Golden Order begins to resemble not salvation, but conquest disguised as holiness. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Golden Order itself is that death itself was never meant to function naturally within it. Under the rule of the Greater Will and Queen Marika, mortality became something controlled and regulated like a law written into reality. The Erdtree's Golden Age was not simply an era of prosperity or divine rule. It was an age where the natural cycle of life and death had been fundamentally altered. At the center of this system was the Rune of Death, also known as Destined Death, one of the great runes that once formed part of the Elden Ring itself. Unlike ordinary death, Destined Death represented true mortality, finality, the unavoidable ending that all living things are normally bound to, and Marika removed it. By extracting the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, the Golden Order effectively severed death from the natural laws of the world. In doing so, Marika created an age where beings blessed by the grace no longer died in the way they once would have. The Erdtree became the center of existence itself, preserving souls beneath its golden canopy and preventing the finality that Destined Death once guaranteed. But before Malekith guarded the Rune of Death, it belonged to another, a mysterious figure known only as the Gloam-Eyed Queen, sometimes called the Dusk-Eyed Queen. She wielded the power of Destined Death long before the Golden Order fully solidified control. She was an Empyrean, a candidate capable of becoming a god, much like Marika herself. Her followers, the Godskin Apostles and Godskin Nobles, served her with terrifying devotion. Few enemy factions in Elden Ring feel as deeply disturbing as the Godskins. Everything about them feels wrong. Their pale robes are stitched from flayed skins of their victims, their bodies twitch unnaturally, stretching and contorting beyond human proportions. Their black flame burns differently from ordinary fire, carrying with it traces of destined death itself. Unlike normal flames, the black flame does not simply burn flesh, it seems to erode life on a deeper level, consuming vitality and soul alike. The Godskins were hunters of gods, not metaphorically but literally. In an age where divine beings ruled the world, they existed as executioners capable of killing immortals. Their very existence represented a threat of the Greater Will's emerging order. And surrounding this ancient death cult are strange connections to another forgotten power, the Deathbirds. The Deathbirds are among the oldest and most cryptic enemies in the lands between, grotesque creatures associated with ghost flame and ancient funeral rites predating the Erd Tree itself. Before the Erd Tree monopolized death, the dead were apparently burned in ghost flame rituals overseen by these beings. This suggests that older systems governing morality once existed before the Golden Order replaced them. The Deathbirds feel like remnants of a prehistoric religion, buried beneath the Erd Tree's roots, echoes of a world where death was accepted rather than denied. At some point, between Marika's forces and the Glomide Queen, Malekith, Marika's shadowbound beast and loyal half-brother, was sent to confront her. Malekith was no ordinary warrior. He existed as an extension of Marika's authority itself, a living weapon created to protect the order she established. And of course he succeeded. The Glomide Queen was defeated, and Malekith took possession of the Rune of Death, sealing destined death away on behalf of Marika and the Greater Will. With its removal complete, the Golden Order's vision of immortality could finally be enforced across the lands between. From this point onward, death became deeply unnatural. People still suffered, bodies still withered, violence still existed, but true death in the absolute sense no longer functioned properly to those embraced by grace. The Erd Tree appeared to absorb the dead into itself, creating a kind of eternal cycle beneath its golden light. Throughout the game, references constantly describe heroes returning to the Erd Tree upon death, as though souls themselves are reclaimed by it. Massive catacombs spread beneath the lands between, all constructed with roots of the Erd Tree, woven like veins. Corpses are entombed directly beneath those roots, implying the burial itself became part of the sacred process of return. But what exactly happens after remains deliberately unclear, and that uncertainty makes the entire system profoundly unsettling. The Golden Order presents this cycle as holy rebirth, a blessing granted through the Erd Tree's grace. Yet there is another interpretation lurking beneath the surface, one that becomes harder to ignore the deeper one looks into the lore. What if the Erd Tree is not simply returning souls to nature? What if it is consuming them? The Greater Will's influence spreads through its roots, light and grace across every corner of the lands between. Souls flow back into the Erd Tree after death. Life itself is governed through the Elden Ring. The imagery begins to resemble not a natural ecosystem but a cosmic system of harvesting and control. Even visually, the Erd Tree often feels less like a normal tree and more like something alien masquerading as divine beauty. Its roots invade tombs, its golden sap nourishes entire civilizations, its grace dictates fate itself, and above all else, it demands obedience. This is part of what makes Elden Ring's world so haunting. The Golden Order initially appears radiant and holy, but beneath its shimmering gold lies an unnerving implication that every concept of life and death has been rewritten by an incomprehensible cosmic force, a force that may not value humanity at all, only order. Even at the height of the Golden Order's rise, the Greater Will was never truly alone. Beneath the Erd Tree's radiance, at the edges of civilization and deep beneath the surface of the world, other outer gods lingered in the distance like cosmic shadows. Some whispered through blood, others through rot, madness, or fire. The lands between was never governed by a single divine force, but by compelling powers pressed against reality from beyond it. The Greater Will simply happened to be winning. Among these rival entities was the Formless Mother, a grotesque and formless god associated with blood and wounds, whose influence would later seep into the twisted ambitions of Moog. There was also the outer god of Scarlet Rot, a horrifying force of decay and disease capable of consuming entire kingdoms beneath scarlet blooms and endless suffering. Then there was the Frenzy Flame, perhaps the most terrifying of them all. Unlike the Greater Will, which seeks order, or the Scarlet Rot, which spreads corruption through life, the Frenzied Flame desires absolute annihilation, total chaos, a return to a state where individuality, suffering, and existence itself are burned away into an indistinguishable mass. Its followers speak of madness not as a curse, but as liberation from the agony of separation and consciousness itself. And somewhere among these ancient powers was the Glow-Eyed Queen, wielder of destined death, whose black flame once threatened the gods themselves. But during this era, one rival force stood above the others as a direct existential threat to the Erdtree, the fell god of the giants. Unlike the distant abstraction of the Greater Will, the fell god feels primal and immediate, a brutal deity of fire worshipped by fire giants in the frozen northern mountains. Its presence is represented by a terrible burning eye, embedded within the bodies of the giants themselves like a living curse. Through their covenant with this god, the giants possess something capable of threatening even the Erdtree, Flame of Ruin, a fire so powerful that not even the Greater Will's Golden Order could extinguish it permanently. And so inevitably, war came. Queen Marika launched a massive campaign against the fire giants, determined to eliminate the only force capable of burning the Erdtree itself. The giants were led by a figure referred to as the Storm Lord or Storm Ruler, another mysterious and mostly forgotten entity whose defeat marked the collapse of the giants' resistance. This war would become one of the defining conflicts of the early Golden Order. At Marika's side stood two of her greatest champions. The first was Radagon, a red-haired warrior who at this point in history had not fully revealed his deeper connection to Marika. Though remembered later as the Holy King and Scholar, Radagon first emerges in the lore as a fierce military leader, fighting in service to the Golden Order's expansion. The second was Hoarah, the savage chieftain of the Badlands. Before becoming Godfrey, first Elden Lord, Hoarah was a warrior defined entirely by violence. He was not a noble king in the traditional sense, but a brutal conqueror whose strength bordered on monstrous. The image of him wrestling beasts with his bare hands feels almost mythological, like a figure torn from ancient epics rather than a civilized ruler. Yet Marika needed exactly that kind of strength. Together, Radagon and Hoarah led the campaign against the giants into the frozen mountaintops of the north. One of the most fascinating details during this war involves the trolls. The trolls were once kin to the giants, enormous beings sharing aspects of the Fell God's influence. But during the conflict, they betrayed their own people and sided with Marika. The evidence of this betrayal is carved directly into their bodies. Many trolls possess massive hollow cavities within their torsos, empty spaces where something once existed. According to the lore, the trolls tore out their divine faces or eyes connected to the Fell God from their own bodies in order to sever themselves from the giants' ancient faith. This is an incredibly disturbing image, an entire race mutilating itself to escape a dying god and survive beneath a new order. The Golden Order rewarded them for this betrayal, but like so many alliances with the Elden Ring, it came at the cost of identity itself. Eventually, Marika's forces triumphed. The giants were massacred, their civilization reduced to ruins buried beneath endless snow. But despite all her power, Marika encountered a terrifying problem. The Flame of Ruin could not be destroyed. No matter how thoroughly the giants were defeated, the flame endured, eternal, unquenchable. The one thing in the world still capable of burning the Erdtree remained alive. So Marika chose another solution. Rather than extinguishing the flame, she imprisoned it. The last surviving fire giant was cursed and condemned to tend to the Flame of Ruin for eternity, trapped forever upon the mountaintop beside the forge of his fallen people. His entire race slaughtered around him. He became both prisoner and warden, eternally guarding the very power Marika feared most. But before the war truly ended, the giant delivered one final act of defiance, a curse upon Radagon. The giant's curse manifested through Radagon's red hair, a trait he would come to deeply resent. In the culture of the Golden Order, golden hair symbolized divine perfection and closeness to the Erdtree. Red hair associated with the hated giants became a mark of shame for Radagon. The implication is deeply ironic. One of the greatest champions of the Golden Order permanently carried the visual stain of the enemy he helped destroy, and yet not everyone viewed it negatively. Radahn, Radagon's future son, would later wear his own red hair proudly, embracing the connection to strength and conquest rather than rejecting it. Where Radagon saw a curse, Radahn saw power. Even after the war, the Flame of Ruin remained far too dangerous to ignore. To ensure it stayed contained, the Golden Order established the Flame Monks, an order devoted to guarding the forge and watching over the flame. But proximity to forbidden power rarely ends well in Elden Ring. Over time, many Flame Monks became enthralled by the very fire they were meant to contain. Some abandoned the Golden Order entirely, seduced by the destructive beauty of the flame they'd sworn to suppress. Their devotion gradually transformed into obsession, and this becomes a recurring truth throughout the history of the Lands Between. The Golden Order can conquer kingdoms, it can rewrite reality, it can bury entire civilizations beneath gold and doctrine, but it cannot fully erase the ancient powers that came before it. Those forces remain waiting at the edges of the world, burning quietly in the dark. With the fire giants defeated and Erdtree standing uncontested above the Lands Between, Queen Marika's rule entered a new phase. The age of conquest was giving way to the age of empire, and at the center of that empire stood a new divine dynasty. Marika chose Hoarah as her consort, or perhaps more accurately, she transformed him. The savage chieftain of the Badlands, of the brutal warrior who once lived only for battle, took on a new identity beneath the authority of the Golden Order. Hoarah became Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Even the name feels symbolic. Hoarah sounds ancient, primal and mostly barbaric, but Godfrey sounds regal, civilized, sanctified beneath the Erdtree's grace. It is as though the Golden Order attempted to polish raw violence into holy kingship. Yet beneath the golden armor and noble title, the beast within him never fully disappeared. That tension defines Godfrey's entire existence. He is both conqueror and king, barbarian and lord. In many ways, he represented what the Golden Order truly is beneath its power, beneath its beautiful exterior. Violence refined into doctrine. To restrain his endless bloodlust, Godfrey carried the great lion Sarosh upon his back, a spectral beast acting almost like a limiter placed upon his nature. The imagery is incredibly telling. The first Elden Lord, the greatest warrior of the age, literally needed a spiritual creature to suppress the savage instincts raging inside of him. Together, Marika and Godfrey established the royal bloodline that would dominate the Lands Between. Their first and most beloved child was Godwyn the Golden. Of all Marika's offspring, Godwyn appears to have come closest to embodying the ideal image of the Golden Order. Noble, radiant, powerful, and admired throughout the kingdom, he represented the promise of Marika's reign in its purest form. His friendship with the dragon Fortisax further elevated his legend, symbolizing reconciliation between the ancient age of dragons and the new order beneath the Erdtree. Even his title, the Golden, feels significant. Godwyn was not merely a prince, he was the heir to an age, but alongside Godwyn came the twins, Morgott and Mohg, and their births revealed the hypocrisy festering in the heart of the Golden Order. Both children were born as omens, bearing the horns and physical sides of the crucible that the Order considered cursed. Despite being sons of Queen Marika herself, despite carrying divine blood within them, they were treated no differently than any other omen born beneath the Erdtree's rule. Perhaps even worse, because their existence was an embarrassment to the ideology Marika had built. The Golden Order preached purity, yet the royal family itself had produced children marked by the primordial forces it condemned, and so the twins were hidden away beneath Leyndell, banished into the sewers beneath the capital like shameful secrets. The imagery could not be more deliberate. Directly beneath the shining holy city, beneath the roots of the Erdtree and the grandeur of divine civilization, the unwanted children of the Golden Order rotted in darkness. Mohg and Morgott grew up imprisoned beneath the kingdom their family ruled, and yet the two brothers responded to that suffering in completely different ways. Mohg became consumed by resentment. Rejected by the Golden Order, cast aside despite his divine bloodline, he eventually turned toward another power entirely, the Formless Mother. This outer god associated with blood, wounds, and twisted communion offered Mohg something the Golden Order could never did: acceptance, or at least the illusion of it. Through the Formless Mother, Mohg discovered cursed blood magic and began building his own terrifying dynasty in secret. His obsession with creating new order eventually spiraled into madness and grotesque ambition, culminating in his attempts to elevate the Empyrean Mikola into the god of a new age. Everything about Mohg feels like the product of abandonment. He is what happens when a child born into divinity is taught from birth that he is monstrous. But Morgott is far more tragic. Unlike Mohg, Morgott never abandoned the Golden Order despite everything it did to him. Somehow, impossibly, he remained loyal. He continued defending the Erdtree and Leyndell even while the society he protected despised his very existence. There is something deeply heartbreaking about Morgott. He is perhaps the single most devoted defender of the Golden Order, yet he is denied the grace and love freely given to others. He calls himself the Veiled Monarch, ruling Leyndell from the shadows because he knows that people would never willingly accept an Omen king. Even the name Margit reflects his hidden existence. When the player first encounters Margit, the Fell Omen, in Stormvale Castle, it appears to be some random demonic figure testing intruders. But later it becomes clear that Margit is Morgoth himself, projecting an illusionary identity to guard the path toward the Erdtree. And importantly, he is testing you. Morgoth understands better than almost anyone what the pursuit of the Elden Ring truly leads to. He has watched the demigods tear the world apart in pursuit of power. He has seen ambition consume kingdoms, and despite being rejected by the Order, he still believes the Erdtree must be protected from those who would exploit it. His loyalty becomes almost tragic in its purity, because no matter how faithfully Margit serves the Golden Order, it never truly accepts him. Even as a king, he remains hidden. Even as protector, he remains cursed. In many ways, the story of Marika's children reveals the central contradiction of the Golden Order itself. It claims to represent perfect divine harmony, yet its own royal bloodline is fractured by rejection, secrecy, curses, and suffering. The Golden Dynasty standing beneath the Erdtree is already beginning to rot from within, and soon that rot will spread to the rest of the world. Far beneath the lands between, hidden under layers of stone, roots, and forgotten history, lies another world entirely. A world without sunlight, a world where artificial stars hang motionless above silent cities. The underground civilizations of Nokron and Nokstella are among the most mysterious locations in all of Elden Ring. Even compared to the rest of the game's fragmented mythology, these cities feel strange and dreamlike, as though they belonged in a different reality, buried beneath the Golden Order's feet. And in many ways they do. The people who lived there, known as the Nox, appear to once have existed on the surface before falling into conflict with the Greater Will itself. Exactly what triggered this conflict is never fully stated, but the implications are incredibly dangerous. The Nox were experimenting with powers they were never supposed to possess. Not merely sorcery or forbidden magic, but technologies and forms of creation that directly threaten the Greater Will's authority. Chief among these was the Fingerslayer Blade, a weapon specifically designed to kill the Two Fingers. That detail alone says everything. The Two Fingers are emissaries of the Greater Will, interpreters of divine lore itself. To create a weapon capable of killing them is not simple rebellion, it is attempted revolt against the cosmic order. The Greater Will does not appear to tolerate such things. As punishment, the Nox were banished underground, exiled beneath the surface of the world, where the civilization would remain hidden beneath artificial night skies forever. Whether this exile was literal divine punishment or simple political conquest later mythologized is unclear, but the result remains the same. The Eternal Cities became tombs beneath the earth. Yet even underground, the Nox never stopped searching for power. If anything, isolation only drove them deeper into experimentation. Long before the Nox arrived, there were signs of another underground civilization that may have already existed there. Massive ruined structures, strange statues, and ancient architecture point toward the Old Dynasty, an older culture associated with the mysterious Minotaur-like ancestral followers found throughout the subterranean regions. These remnants feel impossibly ancient, older than many of the Service kingdoms. It is difficult to tell whether the Nox conquered those ruins, built alongside them, or simply inherited the bones of an already dead civilization. But throughout Elden Ring, this layering of forgotten societies becomes a reoccurring pattern. Every kingdom is built atop of the corpse of another, and the deeper underground one goes, the older the world becomes. The Nox themselves became obsessed with artificial life and imitation divinity. Much like the alchemists and forbidden scholars found throughout the real-world mythology, they seem driven by the belief that life itself could be engineered, perfected, or recreated through intellect rather than divine grace. Of course, this obsession produced horrifying results. Among their creations were dragonkin soldiers, grotesque humanoid beings seemingly engineered in imitation of dragons. But much like the magma worms above ground, these attempts feel tragic rather than triumphant. The dragonkin are malformed and incomplete, giant pale creatures trapped between humanity and draconic power. They are artificial approximations of greatness, not true dragons, not true humans either. The Nox also created the Albinaurics, synthetic life forms born through arcane means rather than natural birth. This revelation completely reframes the tragedy of the Albinaurics seen throughout the game. They are not simply another race within the lands between, they are manufactured beings, artificial, living proof that the Nox were attempting to transcend the boundaries of creation itself. And perhaps most importantly, the Nox sought to create their own lords, their own divine order separate from the greater will. Everything about their civilization suggested people attempting to free themselves from cosmic control and replace divine authority with artificial ascension. That ambition may have doomed them. At some point, catastrophe struck the eternal cities. Stars fell from the heavens, or more accurately, creatures riding upon those stars descended into the underground depths, and these divine creatures will be discussed in great detail in part 2 to this video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great sleep, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.